Hey everybody, welcome back to Screwball, a baseball podcast, your home for everything baseball. I'm your host Mike Lepre, here with my co-host Frank White.
Hey, how's it going?
This is our first week with no baseball, and our plans for the new season obviously got ruined with what's going on in the world, but we're going to bring you a string of episodes here with our favorite players, some current players we like, some stadiums that we like, various games that we've seen in the past that we like, and just we're going to try and bring you baseball content as much as we can. With everything going on with the season and just everything going on in the world. So this episode, we're going to talk about all of our favorite players that we grew up watching, players that we grew up and we kind of admired and liked, and some of were on our favorite teams, and some of them we just admired from afar. And so we're going to get into it with our first players that we get into are our two personal favorite players. So Frank, why don't you start with your favorite player of all time?
Sure. So my favorite player of all time, other than Babe Ruth, because Babe Ruth is my favorite player of all time, and I don't even care. But other than Babe Ruth, my favorite player of all time was Adam Dunn, the big donkey. He was like 6'6", 6'7", like 260. He was just ginormous. He came up. He played for Team USA back in the day. Really had a good career. 462 home runs. He had 40 home runs, exactly 40 home runs, 4 consecutive years.
Wow.
05, 06, 07, 08. He's the only player in baseball history to have exactly 40 home runs, 4 consecutive years.
Wow.
So that he was a power hitter. He was a feared power hitter. He always was up on the league in walks. I think he led the league in walks twice. He always was up high in strikeouts too. If you go look at the strikeout list, I think he's in the he's up there.
Yeah.
Top 20 or so. He's of all time with strikeouts. He's a 2-time All-Star. He was durable. He was a durable player. He never really missed games. He missed games. I know when we got to the White Sox the one year, he had emergency appendectomy.
Yeah.
He missed some games with that. But other than that, he always played. He always played a lot of games. He played in the outfield, for an early part of his career, and then he kind of transitioned to first base, and then at DH he went to AL. But, he was just a really consistent player. He was going to bat like 230, 240-ish. And he was going to hit, 35, 40 home runs every year, driving about 100 RBIs. And, he was going to walk a lot. He wasn't a great fielder, but he was definitely, at the very least, he was average. I think a little bit above average. He had a strong arm in the outfield. He did steal a little bit of bases when he was younger. I think his most in his season was like 16 or 19. I'm not sure exactly. He played with 5 teams throughout his career, starting with the Reds. Got traded to the Diamondbacks for half a season. He played with the Nationals, played with the White Sox, and then played with the A's.
Yep.
He made the playoffs one time, and it was a year he got traded to the A's.
Yep.
He made it to the playoffs, and he was on the A's team that lost to the Royals. The Royals came back.
Yep.
And he never got an appearance. He made the playoffs one time. I think he has like the most home runs. He had the most home runs, or most games played without a playoff appearance. So he made the playoffs and they didn't play him, and he retired after that.
Yeah.
Retired a little early. I think he definitely had 2 to 3, 4 more years left. If he would get to 500 home runs, he might be a Hall of Famer. Yeah, his average is low, strikes out a lot, but 500 home runs hard to keep him out at that point. And at this, a lot of people consider him the reason why baseball is where it is now. The true 3 outcome. You know, he hit home runs, he struck out, or he walked. That was what he did.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where baseball is now. That's what he did. He always did that. But he was a good player. He got MVP votes in 04, 05, and 2010. He was like, I think like 20th in MVP voting and stuff like that. And he actually has stats too in some of his years where he was the hardest guy to double up and double play.
Oh, okay.
Weirdly enough, even though he wasn't a real speed guy. But that's just because of the shifts and his striking out or walking. He really didn't hit the ball on the ground with a guy at first base. He hit that double play.
Yeah.
But he was a really good player, and I always loved watching him. He hit just mammoth home runs, no bat flips, no nothing. He was a goofy guy. He was a great teammate. He was just a really solid player, and it's a shame that he retired, I think, 2 or 3 years early. So I'd love to see him get to 500 and make that push for the Hall of Fame. And it's a shame that he never got to play in a playoff game because he did make some he really made teams better when he played.
Oh, yeah.
He definitely helped them. The fact that he never got in a home run derby. How could you never get him in a home run derby?
It's weird.
He hit 40 home runs 4 straight years. He hit 42 one year. He was in the 30s multiple times. Like how could you never get him in the home run derby?
Yeah.
That's what he did. It was hit home runs.
Yeah, it's weird.
And here's a fact for you.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only player in baseball history to hit a home run that started in one state and it landed in another.
Yep.
At Great American Ballpark, he hit one in dead center field before they put that boat out there. That it went into the river, and it landed in a part of the river where it was considered Kentucky. So he hit a ball from Cincinnati into Kentucky, which you look it up the video, it's like 500 and something feet. It was crushed.
Oh yeah, it's a mammoth home run.
So I mean, he was a really great player. Not a lot of people talk about him, but he was really good. And I always loved watching him, watching highlights of him. I remember the one year at the Nationals, he batted like 263, and he every day in the summer you see a home run. Nationals weren't very good, but he would hit a home run, and then he hit another home run the next day, and the next day hit another home run. He just hit a bunch of home runs, and he was just he was just fun to watch. I always rooted for him, and he's my favorite player. I got autographs from him, and rookie cards and stuff like that, and he's definitely my favorite player, other than Babe Ruth. So
what I always liked about Adam Dunn was that other than his one blemish of a year that I know you know of,
2011.
Yeah. Other than that one blemish of a year, he was a pretty consistent guy, and he just always seemed like he really loved the game, and he played the game like a big kid, and that's what I always liked about Adam Dunn. And yeah, you could always attribute the 3-outcome way of playing to him, and I know a lot of people like to, which you could say that's a good thing, you could say it's a bad thing. I don't really care either way. But I always liked Adam Dunn, so, and I think that's probably because of how much you liked him. So you introduced me to him. So my favorite player of all time, I guess you could call him a little bit of a similarity. And my favorite player of all time growing up was Jason Giambi. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of an asterisk, probably a big asterisk next to Jason Giambi's name with the whole steroid thing. That was just the sign of the times when he was playing, and it was unfortunate, especially me being a kid. He was my favorite player, and just an unfortunate thing to see him go on a press conference live and have to apologize for something he did. It was just it was sucked being a kid and seeing that. A lot of players were doing that at the time, were having to go on live TV and apologize. But more positive notes about Giambi was that in an era of Yankee play when there was Jeter and A-Rod and Alfonso Soriano and Clemens and Pettit and these big stars, Hideki Matsui, it just seemed like the big, tall, powerful first baseman, the guy, number 25, that was always hitting home runs and was always at the center of that lineup was Jason Giambi. And I don't know why, as a kid, I just gravitated toward him. Maybe I saw a little bit of myself in him, just a big goofball out playing in the field. But Giambi always just seemed to have a very serious tone when he was playing. It seemed like he was having fun, but it always seemed like he was all business when he was on the field, which I always liked. Guy had a lot of home runs. I think he hit 50 home runs a few times at the Yankees, maybe even just a couple of times. But even still, he was a pretty consistent hitter in that lineup. He had a high average. Again, you could put an asterisk next to the stats, but I mean, the only thing I could say that would be a negative about him would be his fielding, which, I mean, we always joke about a little bit with his fielding.
Yeah, I mean, his fielding, actually fielding the position over there at first base, because he came up as a third baseman.
Yeah.
And that didn't last long.
Mm.
Actually, fielding first base, he wasn't awful.
Mm.
But he couldn't throw. He had throwing issues.
Yeah.
That's why it really derailed him from third base and got him to first base. Fielding the ball, he wasn't terrible, though.
No.
No Gold Glover.
No.
But you put him over there, he was definitely your average, at least average first baseman. His throwing was not great, but that's a position you can kind of get away with it.
Yeah, it's probably the only position you can get away with it.
Sure.
So yeah, Jason Giambi is my favorite player for all those reasons, and I always liked seeing him even post Yankees when he was an older guy. He's playing with the Rockies and the Indians, and he was just he was almost like the veteran out there. He wasn't like
hitting walk-off home runs, and pinch hit home runs.
I love that, man.
And you got to remember with the Yankees at the end of his tenure with the big mustache. You know.
Oh yeah.
He was a force in the lineup. High average, high on base, walked a lot, hit some big home runs.
Oh yeah.
Never won. Got there after the Yankees won and left before the Yankees won.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But he was always a big part of their team being good. And you can remember that one home run he hit in the downpour, the grand slam. The walk-off grand slam when it was downpouring out.
Yep.
And they were going to call the game, get the walk-off grand slam. I mean, there's been some home runs you mentioned. I seen him hit a home run upper deck.
Yeah, me too.
When he had the big mustache, you know. So I mean, there's a guy who always had superpower, and he's a guy you might see manage.
I hope so.
A lot of players really liked him. A lot of players really looked up to him. A veteran leadership. You could see him managing. He's
Yeah.
kind of like that Raul Ibanez. You
Yeah.
you kind of see him managing. Beltran, obviously he had his issues, but similar player where you could definitely see him being a manager. So, I mean, Giambi was definitely a solid player. And, if you take away the steroid issue, or if steroid players eventually get in and start doing something, you could definitely make a case for him getting in.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Definitely.
Over 400 home runs and stuff like that. He was definitely a solid player. So
Yeah. For his time, he was a dominant player for the time.
Especially with the A's. He had some really good years with the A's.
Oh, yeah.
So.
All right, so those are our two favorite players, Jason Giambi and Adam Dunn. And so next we'll round off some players that weren't necessarily our favorites, obviously, but were some players that we just always liked watching, and we just enjoyed their maybe the team they were on, or maybe it was just the era. But there's some players that we just both really enjoyed.
And we're going to go through a couple players here that we really liked. Might not be our favorite, but they're definitely on our favorite list.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of players that we watched that we liked.
Yeah, we're going to miss some for
here's
sure.
Some names here. A lot of these guys aren't the big Hall of Fame guys. There's going to be, one or two here that are going to be in the Hall of Fame or whatever. But a lot of these guys are just kind of names that were really good and, might slip past your mind for a second or two. Just players that you might not even remember until you hear the name. But they're just good players that we liked. We liked watching. We liked using in video games. Whatever it was, like their bat and stance, and kind of just made you follow them. So the guy I really want to talk about next is Alfonso Seriano.
Yeah, man.
He came up with the Yankees. He's a 7-time All-Star. He was a 4-time Silver Slugger. He was All-Star Game MVP one year.
Oh, okay.
He went 30-30 3 times, and he was 40-40 once.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was almost 40-40 twice. He was on the cusp of 40-40 twice. He had 41 stolen bases, I believe, and 38 home runs. He also, one year, I think, had 46 stolen bases. The one year he went 44. I think he had like 46 stolen bases, or 48 stolen bases, and like 43 home runs. So he was on really decently close to 50-50.
Yeah. Which is, I mean...
Yeah, he had MVP votes, lower, not like, like 5th or 2nd or something like that in MVP votes. But like in the teens somewhere. He got MVP votes in 02, 03, 06, 07, and 2012. He played for 4 teams throughout his career. Played with the Yankees, played with the Rangers, played with the Nationals, played with the Cubs, played with the Yankees again. Had 412 home runs, 289 stolen bases. His last year, he kind of didn't really play at all. Very shortly, right at the beginning of the year, he had that sickness in spring training. Had a badge for spring training. Came to the year, struggled, and right away, and he just retired.
Yeah,
and he was old. But if he would have played that year out, he would have been 420s, 430s, home runs. He would have got the 300 stolen bases. And he had 400 home runs and 300 stolen bases. He would have been like one of like 12 players or so to ever have that.
Yeah,
I can't see how you would be able to keep him out of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
he's also one of the few players. I think there's only a couple, and I'm not sure exactly, but I think there's only a couple that have 1,000 hits in both leagues, both in the AL and the NL.
Yep,
and he was one of them. He had over 2,000 career hits, 270 lifetime batting average. He always swung one of the heaviest bats. They always said he had that kind of closed stance with the shaking of the bat, but he had some dominant power. He swung all the time, and when he got hot, I mean, it was disgusting. I mean, look at towards the end of his career when he came back to the Yankees, he had all them home runs and RBIs.
Oh yeah,
in like a week. I mean, he was just dominant. He was a dominant power bat who never really got talked about. But he was there. People talked about him a little bit, but never got really as much credit as he deserved. He was a solid second baseman. He went to the Rangers, played second, then they went to the Cubs and played outfield. Struggled in the outfield at first. His last year, full year with the Cubs, he almost won a Gold Glove in the outfield.
Yeah,
that took he finally adapted. He learned. He almost won a Gold Glove in the outfield. Then he came back to the Yankees and was kind of more of a DH, played a little bit of outfield. But he was a big power guy. He never really hit for a low average. He was in the 270s all time at least. Stole bases. He was definitely a lightning rod in the middle of lineups. And he was involved in the A-Rod trade. Was on some not great Ranger teams. Was not on some some decent Cubs teams for a little while. Then some not so good Cub teams. Yeah. He was on the Nationals with Dunn, and obviously that team wasn't very good. But he was a clutch player.
Yeah. Hit
home runs in the playoffs for the Yankees his first stint.
Yeah.
All-Star Game MVP, hit a big home run there. He was just a solid player, and you know what? It's a guy who I think is decent chance at a Hall of Fame. I mean, I think.
Yeah,
I think I'm a
I'd
little
vote
too
him in.
generous, I guess, for Hall of Fame guys because I believe if you're good, you belong in.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he would have got that 300 stolen bases, I think it would have been really hard to keep him out.
Yeah.
But he was I loved watching him, and I rooted for him all the time. And when he got traded back to the Yankees, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
It was such an awesome thing. And last year we were at a game and he was at the game.
Yeah.
They brought him on the big scoreboard, so that was crazy. Like seeing him. But yeah, just an awesome player, one of my favorite players, and really a dominant player. And if you want to look at some more of his stats, go look at them. They're great. They really are good stats.
Yeah,
so.
Numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Two things that always struck me about Alfonso Soriano was his consistent batting stance. Always had that kind of iconic, crazy batting stance, the big waving bat, and it just I don't know. There was something about it. It kind of he drew your eye to him. You know what I mean?
He had a bigger leg kick.
Yeah.
But he had kind of like Sheffield, where his batting stance almost meant power.
Yeah.
It just looked like when he swung the bat, there was gonna be power coming out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
That's what it did.
And the two moments that always stick out in my brain, I guess you could call it a moment, but when he was in the 0-1 World Series in that Game 7 where Luis Gonzalez hit the walk-off little floater, he was the one that hit the go-ahead home run that put the Yankees ahead to put Mo in the game to win the World Series.
Yeah.
He would have been the hero had obviously the Diamondbacks not mounted that big comeback. But Alfonso Soriano was kind of the hero of that game before that. And then when he came back to the Yankees and he had in 2 games he had 10 RBIs or something. It was something ridiculous.
Yeah, I think he had 20 or something RBIs in a week.
Yeah, so he came back and just completely was red hot and kind of reinvigorated the Yankee fan base, because at that time the Yankees were kind of in a weird limbo of their record. But I loved growing up watching Alfonso Soriano. He was great. So the next guy that I'm going to talk about, me and Frank definitely like him. Great third baseman, Aramis Ramirez.
Sure.
He had a great career. I believe he played 18 years. There was something always about him watching him. When I was growing up, I would play as him in the MLB video games and in 2K, and there was always something about his demeanor on the field, his style. He was a great hitter. He's actually listed as the 12th best offensive, the 7th best, I believe, offensive third baseman of all time, which is nothing to sneeze at, playing 18 years. And
especially at a position of third base, who's always been a great offensive position. I mean, he was a great player. And no one ever really talked about Aramis Ramirez.
No.
He always drove in runs. Even when at the end of his career when he was playing with the Brewers, he always drove in runs.
Mm-hmm.
He always drove in runs.
Yeah.
And he never really got talked about. And I think, you're going to go into a little bit more of his stats. I think he's a guy who really should be right on that Hall of Fame.
I agree.
And I could easily see him putting him in. That's a guy that when we in the Hall of Fame, if you're good or dominant for your era, you should be in. And that's the guy that should be in. I think similar to Soriano, they were dominant and they were good in their era, they should be in. But, I mean, you can dive into some more stats here. So
yeah, he had almost, if you want to look up the stats, he's almost directly comparable to Ron Santo, who's a Cubs great. And Ron Santo I believe Ron Santo got into the Hall of Fame through the second round of voting that they do, like the Modern Era Committee or whatever, the Golden Age Committee. I forget what committee it was, but he ended up getting in.
There's a couple different ones, but there's the Modern Era, the Gold Era, there's stuff like that. But yeah, I think he got voted in on the essentially a second chance.
Yeah, exactly. He got voted in later, so they unfortunately missed him the first time because he was another great third baseman. And Aramis Ramirez, if you're comparing the stats, if you're in the grand scheme of things, his stats aren't super impressive, but if you're comparing to other third basemen, his stats are really good. I mean, 7th best. I mean, when you consider that he hit about in the mid 300s of home runs, 360 or somewhere in that ballpark, drove in a lot of runs. I mean, offensive production out of third base for 18 years like that, that's the thing too. He was consistent. He's a consistent hitter, and if I were a voter, I would definitely look twice at Aramis Ramirez. He was a great player, and I loved watching him growing up. There was something about it. I don't know, it's just one of those X Factor things that he just drew my eye, and I don't know why. Maybe it had something to do with playing the video games too.
Yeah, I think he won a Gold Glover too.
Yeah,
in his career.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a solid player.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of thought, some people might not really think this, but I always kind of thought he was like it's a weird way to say it. I don't know kind of if it's going to make a lot of sense. Almost like a poor man's Manny Ramirez.
Yeah.
He kind of hit that way. He didn't have the dominant power like Manny did, and he didn't have this Hollywood, mantra. But he was kind of, he just kind of always drove in runs and just kind of went by his thing. He was a little bit more, I guess you could say, like I said, like a poor man's Manny Ramirez.
Yeah, he didn't have the flair like Manny Ramirez.
But he was very similar. A lot of doubles, a lot of RBIs. The home runs were down a little bit. Average, not quite, because Manny Ramirez was, a dominant player. But like I said, very similar. I thought, and kind of at times kind of had a similar batting stance. Ramos Ramirez was a little bit more open.
Yeah.
But he struck fear into pitchers.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? He just doesn't get talked about that much.
No, and sometimes those players that don't have that flair, even if they have consistent stats, like look at perfect example is DJ LeMahieu, who is just quietly goes about his business, but has unbelievable stats when you look at it. That's kind of like, you can say that someone like a Ramos Ramirez, where if they're not big and in your face and they don't have the big personality, sometimes they fly under the radar, and I think that might have been the case for him. But, I mean, it's not like people just don't recognize him as a great third baseman. They do, but it's just that people are trying. He's towing that line of Hall of Fame, which I think that I think he should get the budge and go in. But
yeah, people just kind of forget about him. He didn't play on a bunch of super great teams.
That's the thing too.
But he always drove in runs. If he had a chance, he was driving the run in.
Yeah.
If he had a chance, he was coming up with a ball in the gap, hitting, driving the run in.
Yeah.
He was hit, 20 home runs a lot, almost every year. He was in the 20s of home runs. Above average third baseman.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a solid player. If he was on your team, you knew third base was going to be taken care of, and the middle of your lineup had some muscle in it.
Oh yeah, all the way to the end of his career, you knew what you were getting.
Yeah.
So that's all I got to say about Ramos Ramirez. Who do you have next on your list?
So next, I have a pitcher.
Okay.
It's David Wells.
Yeah.
So, Boomer.
Mm-hmm.
But now this is a big goofball. Big guy, mostly heavy set. Big goatee, bald. You know the stories. He wore the Babe Ruth hat out and for the Yankees. And Joe Torre was like, "What are you doing?" Pulled him out of the game. He had had that one game where he struck out a bunch of guys, and they ran out of the K's out there in the crowd, and they started hanging up beer mugs, and he was smiling and waving to them in the middle of the game and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He was crazy.
Oh yeah.
But he was a rubber arm.
Mm.
He pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched. He threw 200 plus innings 8 times in his career.
Wow.
He was a 3-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champ. He was the ALCS MVP in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
He was 239 and 157 in his career, which is pretty good.
Oh yeah.
His ERA is high though, 4.13.
Mm-hmm.
He was never a real low ERA guy, but he was never a really high guy. He had a year here or there where he was kind of high. At the end of his career, he was kind of high. But for the most part, he was, mid to high 3s or very low 4s, mid to low 4s.
Mm.
But he pitched a lot of innings. He had, he won games. He placed Cy Young, the Cy Young Award. He placed third twice.
Okay.
He finished. He had MVP votes in '98 and 2000.
Mm-hmm.
He played for 9 different teams. I'm not going to go through all of them, but Yankees, Red Sox, Toronto, Detroit, Cincinnati. There's a couple of them there. San Diego, Dodgers. I mean, there's a bunch of them right there.
Yeah,
We
wow.
played for 9 teams.
Yeah.
Obviously, through the perfect game.
Mm.
And the story with that. Through the perfect game after being hungover and
Yeah.
all kind of crazy stuff like that. But that's who he was. He was a goofball,
Mm-hmm.
but he knew pitching. He had that big loop-de-loop curveball. He threw all his pitches he could throw right where he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a great pitcher who 8 innings, brought chemistry to the team, and he was just a guy you had to root for.
Yeah.
And he was dominant.
Mm-hmm.
He was dominant. There was times where he was just locked down.
Yeah.
He was just not going to give nothing up.
Mm-hmm.
He fought. He threw a lot of pitches. He technically never retired.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
He kind of just faded out. He never technically signed his retirement papers. He played until he was older. He played with the Padres. He was really old at that point. But his back, obviously, was the killer in 03 with the Yankees. He hurt his back there, just with that little flinch. Hurt his back. He used to get shots. Some points in his career, he got shots before every game. You're supposed to get the shot like once every 2-3 months or whatever. He would get a shot every game in his back.
Oh wow.
Just to pitch. And you guys didn't play great. But eventually that caught up with him with his back. Obviously him getting older and really kind of breaking down on him.
Yeah.
But he was a really good pitcher. His ERA is a little high. That's why I don't think he really got the Hall of Fame votes. but he was a really good pitcher. You gotta love watching him. There's a documentary on him. He still coaches baseball. I think he coaches at high school. He always wanted to be in the majors, coaching either manager or pitching coach, but no team really gave him a chance. I think because he's a little too goofy and a little outspoken. I think a little too much. So teams kind of faded away from him. He might get that chance down the line. You never know.
Yeah.
But he does coach high school baseball. And he does have a Twitter, which he has some funny stuff he posts on there. I like to follow, and he interacts with his fans and stuff like that, and he posts some funny things. But he was a really good pitcher, and he's definitely one of my favorite players, and I actually have an autographed picture of him as well.
Yeah, you gotta love David Wells. You'd be hard pressed to find a Yankee fan that didn't love David Wells. That at least was a little bit our age or a little older fan that can remember him pitching. I mean, he was just he always that iconic thing of him throwing the perfect game and pumping his fist and getting carried out and throwing his hat in the air. It's just an iconic scene, especially for Yankee fans. So always loved David Wells. So then I've actually got a picture next too, and again another guy that both of us really enjoyed watching, and we have just funny little stories of with Bronson Arroyo.
Oh yes.
You could consider him enemy territory. He was a Red Sox, especially during the 04 whole thing. That is an infamous series with the Yankees and the Red Sox, and it'll almost give all reason to not like him. But I think Bronson Arroyo, even though he may not have the most overwhelming pitching stats in the world, I think that he seems to be a really cool, down-to-earth guy. I believe the story is that he plays his guitar and goes to meet fans pre-game with the Reds. I believe that's how the story goes with him. Yep. And just I always think, when I think of Bronson Arroyo, I think of that big straight out leg kick that he's got when he delivers his pitches.
Really tall guy, had the long hair. He had that big leg kick. I think a lot of people, when they're fooling around, warming up and stuff, throwing the ball, they kind of imitate with the straight leg at times. I always loved Bronson Arroyo. He's a goofball.
Yeah, he's another guy. Yeah, but more so that the reason I bring it, and I got another guy like this too, is that he's almost in our friend group. We got a little bit of an inside joke with these guys. Bronson Arroyo, when we did a tournament in MLB The Show, we all drafted a team, and Frank here drafted Bronson Arroyo, and he made it to the World Series and pitched Bronson Arroyo every game.
Yeah, So it was funny because it was before the openers.
Yeah.
And I was messing with Brian at Camp here when he was here. You guys heard him. It was years ago, and I told him, I said, starting pitching's overrated. Starting pitching's overrated. So I had one starting pitcher. And it was Bronson Arroyo. He was like 30, 38, 39, 40 years old.
Yeah, poor guy.
I had one, and I got to the World Series.
Yeah.
And he pitched game 1. He pitched game 1, game 4, game 6, and game 7 for me.
Yeah. That's what it was.
I lost in game 7 with him, but it was fantastic. He's just he never really threw hard. He had that big 12-6 curveball.
Yeah.
Pitched for the Reds for a long time.
Yeah.
He just always found a way to just be in the league.
Yeah.
He's always like at best maybe a 3-man at his best. Like a really good 3-man, but he was always like a 4 or 5-man. And he just always hung around the league.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just a really good, just a solid player. And if he was on your team, you're happy. And you knew you were going to get out of him. Yeah,
he seemed like he would be a guy that would be really valuable in the clubhouse, is what I always kind of gravitate towards people like that. Like players, you'll see my list here, got some players that weren't necessarily the greatest hitters, and maybe not even, they wouldn't even be considered for the Hall of Fame, but they just seemed like they just had this aura around them, and they just brought a team together, and they were almost a player that you needed on your team, like a Bronson Arroyo. Like you just needed that little extra boost in your morale for a team, and I think Bronson Arroyo was one of those guys. So who do you?
He also could pitch out of the bullpen, as we've seen throughout his career too. I mean, he did that. He came back sometimes when he kind of thought his career was over. He came back and pitched for Diamondbacks, had some good years. He just never. Every time he kind of thought he was like, he kind of bounced back.
Yeah.
And he's just a very likable guy. He was just. I always liked getting him in video games and having the big leg kick.
Yeah. Yeah, who do you got next, if that's it on Bronson?
Yeah, I mean, that's it with him, I think. The next guy I like to talk about, I know I said we didn't have too many Hall of Fame guys, but this guy, obviously, is a Hall of Fame. Randy Johnson.
Yeah, man.
Big unit.
Mm-hmm.
He's just about the best left-handed pitcher of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And I really think he is. I think he's the greatest left-handed pitcher of all time.
Well, who would it be? It would be him and Steve Carlton and who else would be?
Then you got some really older guys.
We can
really get into, but
you get in the weeds with that. Yeah.
But I really think he's the greatest Koufax you can kind of put on there, I
Yeah.
guess. But Randy Johnson, I think, is the greatest of all time. 5-time Cy Young, 10-time All-Star Game. He was the Co-World Series MVP. He won the ERA title 4 times. He won the Triple Crown, though, too, which is most wins, lowest ERA, and most strikeouts. He had MVP votes in 93, 95, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 01, 02, 04.
Wow.
Okay. He also finished second in the Cy Young in 04.
Mm.
And he finished second in Cy Young in 04, 93, and 97.
Okay.
He got third in 94. And he got seventh in 98.
Man.
So count the 5 times he won and all the times he placed right there. I mean, he was 303 and 166. 3.29 career ERA.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, too, a lot of these stats came more when he hit about 28, 29. So he really turned it on.
Yeah.
And became this dominant pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
He had 100 complete games in his career, 37 shutouts.
Wow.
He had 4,875 strikeouts, which is the second most of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He also had 2 saves. How about that?
Oh,
In his
okay.
regular season career.
Okay.
There's a little nugget there for you.
Mm-hmm.
He pitched till he was 45 years old.
Yep.
With the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Pitched for 6 teams. You can count Yankees, Diamondbacks, Giants,
Mm-hmm.
Expos, Astros for half a year. He was 10-1 with the Astros. Go look at those stats when he went to the Astros.
Oh, wow.
Gross. He's doing no-hitter, 1990. He also played for the Mariners. We forgot about that. Yeah, obviously. So he threw a no-hitter in 1990. He threw a perfect game in 04 at 40 years old.
Yep.
He also had 11 no-hitters or perfect games broken up in the 7th inning or later. He's second most on that list. Nolan Ryan's first with 24.
It's like video game
really
stats.
Ridiculous. But, yeah, Randy Johnson, the big unit, he's gross. 6'11", 6'10" on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
That sidearm, that sling, kind of like Chris Sale.
Mm-hmm.
A little less, flinging around like Sale, but similar. Kind of whipping the ball. His slider started behind you,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's got some great stories and great videos and great highlights. Hit the bird. That's a crazy one.
Oh, yeah.
John Kruk throwing it over his head,
Yep.
Larry Walker with the helmet backwards, and
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't smile, You're like, all right, this guy's angry now. He was crazy. He was dominant.
Yeah.
And people, always brought up Bumgardner coming out that year with the playoffs, and he pitched yesterday or a couple days ago and came out. Randy Johnson did the same thing. He threw like 130 pitches, 140 pitches, and the next day he was out there pitching, saving, and finished the game against the Yankees.
Yep.
He had that long hair. He was just a mean-looking guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was just huge, big guy, dominant. Scary looking. Got to the Yankees. He had the first day he was there. He had the issue with the reporter.
Yep.
It kind of set a bad tune there. He never really pitched great with the Yankees, but that's not. I had no care.
Mm.
I love Randy Johnson.
Mm.
He's one of my favorite players of all time. I have a rookie card of his. He was just so dominant. You go look at his stats. It's crazy. He was a good fielder too. As a big guy. I think he had 1 career home run as a hitter.
Mm.
I mean, he was just a great player.
Yeah.
And I love looking at highlights. And I loved watching him play. Pitching at 45 years old. I mean, it didn't matter. He was always really good, and he always had respect out of everybody.
Yep.
So, I mean, he's just a really, really great player. So, I don't know if you have anything on Randy Johnson.
Yeah, I mean he's pretty self-explanatory. I think everyone knows how great Randy Johnson was. He was, the big long hair, the mustache, big snarl he always had on. He was intimidating. If I was at the plate against Randy, especially if I was a lefty, and I was against Randy Johnson, I'd be like John Kruk. Just my only objective is just to survive.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, just go watch some clips of Randy Johnson if you're not super familiar. He was unbelievable, and like you said, he just had a rubber arm. He just pitched forever, and he pitched well. What'd you say? A 3.29 ERA for his career.
Yeah.
I mean, and you consider that he was pitching until he's 45. I mean, that's probably even a skewed stat because of that, because he played longer.
Yeah. And in the beginning of his career, he was like a wild thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like when he got to about 28, 29 years old, when you're kind of hitting your prime, he turned it on.
Yeah.
His stats from like 30 to 40 are ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous. That's when he won his Cy Youngs. I mean, he was disgusting.
Yeah.
He was disgusting. He made teams really good.
Oh, yeah.
He turned teams really good.
Yeah.
And he just he carried. He helped really carry that World Series team. Won.
Yeah.
He was dominant.
The Diamondbacks team. Yeah, that the Mariners team he was on. He was dominant. I mean, it was just...
And you know what, too? He was on the Giants kind of early before they got their run.
Mm.
He was a big part of being a veteran leadership out there at the Giants, kind of teaching some of them young guys.
Yeah.
He was just a great pitcher, a great guy. And I love hearing him talk. Once in a while he gets on the MLB Network or whatever. He gets on and talks. So I love listening to him talk because he was just so good.
Yeah.
He's literally, I think, the best left-handed pitcher of all time in baseball. and arguably, I think he's top. I really think he's top 3, but at least top 5 best pitchers of all time.
Yeah, hard to argue.
I think he really could be. It's like Cy Young, Nolan Ryan, like Randy Johnson. I can't see really.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
You can make the argument for sure.
And he was that good, that dominant, and he was just he really was unhittable.
Yeah,
he got a little wild at times, but it was to his advantage most of the time.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Yeah, he was effectively wild, that whole thing. But I mean, man, Randy Johnson, like I said, go watch some clips if you're unfamiliar, especially with the whole bird thing. And man, he's another guy who's just got this this mystique about him, and he's just really cool. He seems like a cool dude if you met him in real life.
Yeah, and I remember him. I believe it was the perfect game with Diamondbacks when he threw it. I remember when he finished it off and he just stuck that glove up in the air.
Yeah,
like the claw, and he just screamed. I just always remember that vision. He still stuck that claw up in the air.
Yeah,
and it was just like that was it. Like he was just so intimidating. And that was at 40 years old.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine?
Yeah,
I mean, some of the 40-year-olds in the league now trying to do that. I mean, it's just no way.
Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, good pick on that one, Randy Johnson. I can't imagine too many people don't at least respect his game. I mean, Randy Johnson was awesome. Another guy that I think we both like here that I think actually may even you can consider flying under the radar a little bit, Torrey Hunter. Love Torrey Hunter. Great hitter, great fielder. He was an all-around player. I mean, he had power. He could bat for average. He'd steal bases. He had a great arm. He had a great glove. I mean, one of the things that I think about when I think of Torrey Hunter is him robbing that home run off Barry Bonds in the All-Star game, and Barry Bonds picking him up like he was nothing, like he was a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I always remember them fooling around, and Torrey Hunter always having that big smile on him. Actually,
always had a big smile.
Oh yeah, he seemed like a guy that really loved the game. Really, really like I said with some of these guys, like just a big kid. Always had a big smile on, but there were some moments in his career where he was all business, and he was very obviously in the game. Like there's I think later in his career when he got ejected and he got his jersey ripped off, and was
that with the Angels or the Tigers?
I believe that actually might have been with the Tigers because it was later in his career.
Yeah,
but
was it with the Twins actually?
Oh, you know what? It might have been with the Twins.
Might have been with the Twins, but either way, he was a veteran guy who always led a team. Team was always kind of good when Torrey Hunter was there.
Yeah,
the Twins always were solid. The Angels had some solid years. Detroit was deep into the playoffs. Came back to the Twins and kind of helped build that. Build the team up a little bit. Yeah, he was a solid player. Definitely one of the best defensive outfielders of all time.
Oh, 100%.
Me and you both playing outfield was definitely a guy to watch.
Oh yeah,
watch him how to play the outfield. I mean, he was just really, really great player, a really likable guy, and he should be a Hall of Famer.
Oh, 100%.
He should definitely be in maybe a later, towards the end of his chances, but definitely should be a Hall of Famer.
I agree.
I mean, won a bunch of Gold Gloves and hit a good amount of home runs and decent average. I mean, he was just a really good player, really likable too, which is a big thing too for Hall of Fame. You got to be kind of likable. It seems like.
Yeah.
So he's definitely a great player who me and you both really liked.
Oh yeah, and obviously you got to look out for his son too. I believe his son is playing. I think he's actually a really good football player too. I think Torrey Hunter himself was, before he came to baseball, was a really good football player too.
He was a great athlete.
Yeah, I was going to say he was one of those dual sport athletes where at the end of his college, I believe it was college, at the end of his college career, he could make the decision: do you want to play football? Do you want to play baseball? I mean, those guys are really people that can do that when they're that young are super talented, and I think he made the right choice coming to baseball. At least maybe a little biased being baseball fans, but I think his son is in the similar position where he can make a decision. And yeah, Torrey Hunter, another guy that I just really enjoyed watching growing up, and I think that if I met him in real life, it would be just what you saw on the field. The same guy, there's transparency there. So yeah, do you have anything else on Torrey Hunter? Or?
No, that's pretty much it. Just he was a great player and a really likable guy.
Yeah, 100%. What do you got next?
And now we kind of had a couple guys there. We kind of really dove into a bunch of stats with. Now we're gonna kind of go into a little bit more of a listing, some names, and go into some smaller stats with them. Because we can't. We don't want to take up. We could be here for a week.
Oh yeah.
Our players that recently retired or we watched throughout our career, our lifetimes, throughout their careers, and we really liked. So the next guy that I like to talk about, kind of similar to Torrey Hunter, I guess you could say, in one aspect, was Jim Edmonds.
Yeah.
Unbelievable fielder.
Yeah.
8-time Gold Glove, 4-time All-Star, won the World Series in 2006 with the Cardinals. 276 batting average, 393 home runs, 1,199 RBIs. he was a clutch player.
Oh yeah.
And he always had memorable catches. I mean, the one where he dove straight backwards with the Angels.
Yeah.
Falling up the hill, Tal's Hill in Houston, and still catching the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He just always made great plays.
Mm-hmm.
Always, 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 always. He was a dominant fielder. He never had super speed. So, might be make some plays for some guys. It might be a little bit more routine. He had a dive for, but he always made the play.
Yeah.
He was a dominant player. He was a dominant defender.
Mm.
And he always came up big in hits.
Yeah.
And I think if he would have played one more year, he would have got them 400 home runs.
Mm.
And he got that 1,200 RBIs, a little bit more round numbers. Definitely would have helped his Hall of Fame case with 8 Gold Gloves and a World Series championship.
Yep.
But, yeah, he was a great player. And definitely one of the guys that I loved watching. And I still love watching highlights of him playing outfield and still playing outfield, playing softball now. He was just a guy I looked up to watching. Because I love defense. I think that's where I specialty is at.
Mm-hmm.
When I play was defense.
Oh yeah.
So I just loved watching those guys and just kind of learning and being just a quarter or just a piece as good as those guys could be defensively.
Yeah.
So he was just a really great player. And if you ever get a chance, go watch some of his highlights, making some of these plays, especially that one diving straight back is unbelievable. It's one of the greatest plays of all time.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's what sticks out in my mind when I think of Jim Edmonds is that catch where he's diving backwards, and it's just like, how do you even make that? Like, how do you? First of all, you got to track that ball and know that that's what you got to get done to catch that ball, and to actually execute and do it. I mean, I would like to know the StatCast catch probability on that. That the new stats that they got with the outfielders now. But yeah, that's a good pick. Jim Edmonds he was unbelievable, man. He just another all around player like Torrey Hunter. Just he could do everything: speed, throw, catch, hit for power, everything. So to shift a little bit more of an I guess you could call it an unfortunate player. Great for his time, but had his career cut short a little bit. Was Prince Fielder. Sure. I really loved Prince Fielder, and he was really dominant for the time. He had a lot of home runs, big imposing presence at the plate. Obviously was, bigger guy, obviously wasn't like a speed threat or a fielding threat or anything like that. He could hold his own fielding wise, but I mean, at the plate, he was a real threat, especially in the middle of a lineup.
I think he actually has more inside the park home runs than Rick Henderson.
That's a ridiculous stat, and I almost don't want it to be true.
Yeah, I'm almost positive he has more inside the park home runs than Ricky Henderson. I think he had 2 or 3 in his career. I think Ricky Henderson either had 1 or 0, which is pretty crazy.
That's weird, especially
I think he might have had 1, but I think Prince Fielder had 2.
That's weird. Career. That's a nice stat. I like that. But what I always liked about Prince Fielder was that I always, for some reason, liked his batting stance, and he had a flair for the dramatic, and I always liked the way he swung the bat and the way he would almost. There's this new era of pimping a home run, and I think it goes overboard a lot. But he had a nice way of pimping it, but not getting overzealous with it and like overdoing it. I always thought that he was a really fun player. I liked it. He's another guy I thought that if I met, it would be really cool to meet. I thought that he was one of the best players of probably the last decade, and I just what maybe even brings me a little bit closer to him is that it's just an unfortunate thing what happened to him with the injury for a guy that never got hurt, almost quite literally never got hurt.
Yeah.
And he's a bigger guy too. The bigger guys tend to get the injuries, and he just always was on the field.
Yeah, and he obviously Cecil Fielder's son. He was kind of Cecil Fielder with a little bit more, stardom.
Yeah,
a little bit more ability.
Yeah.
He really helped turn the Brewers around.
Yep.
Him and Ryan Braun. So yeah, he was definitely a memorable player. Watching him, went to Detroit and had some decent years over there. Yeah, he had the neck injury and that really literally took his career right out.
Yeah.
Which is weird too with the kind of the new age we're in. Injuries really like that don't really happen. Like career-ending injuries at like a decently young age don't really happen anymore.
Yeah, he was pretty young.
But it happened to him, and it's a shame because he would have probably had a shot at the Hall of Fame with just decent numbers for the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, he probably had a good chance at the Hall of Fame. That's what's so unfortunate. I think he, I forget the exact total, but he had the same amount of home runs as his dad when his career unfortunately got cut short. I believe it was in the 311 or 312, 313, somewhere in that ballpark. But he was, he was young and he was already at that many home runs. He was already at his dad's total. So I think that you give him a career, he's probably still playing, or at least close to the end of his career here, and he would probably be a Hall of Famer. For my money, he would probably be a Hall of Famer.
He'd probably be high 400s or just, probably sneak over to 500, low 500s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shame his career got cut short, but, lucky that we've seen, whatever 7, 8, 9 years it was.
Yeah. Yeah, we were lucky. Baseball fans were lucky. He was a good player. So who do you got? Who do you got next on your list?
The next guy I want to talk about, he's a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what happened this past year with the voting. Paul Konerko,
Mm-hmm.
6-time All-Star, ALCS MVP, '05 World Series champ, broke that curse for the White Sox.
Yep.
439 home runs, 279 career batting average. He was another clutch guy. He hit the big grand slam in '05.
Oh yeah.
You know, he always came up clutch. Always drove in runs. He always got the hit.
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing against the Yankees. He always came up with a hit. Always got a home run. Always never said nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, had that great goatee for a lot of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He just was a great player.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good first baseman for a long time. Mr. White Sox, I really think.
Yeah.
I really think he's arguably one of the best White Sox of all time.
Yeah.
If you have Mount Rushmore, he's on there.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, he started his career as a catcher.
Is that right?
Yeah, you know, he was with the I believe he was drafted by the Dodgers.
Okay.
But yeah, he was a catcher when he got drafted.
Mm.
But he played first base with the White Sox for a long time, and he was a great player. Like I said, I think he's Mr. White Sox, and he should be a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt in my mind that he was dominant in his era. He was one of the best players to play in his era, in his time, in the early to, well, I guess, recent 2000s. He was dominant.
Yeah.
Always had home runs, always drove in runs, you know, had big hits, consistent. He helped his White Sox. They were always, you know, in the hunt for things when he was there. He was just really a dominant player, and I can't believe he got kicked off the ballot like that because he had, you know, he was like the 23 to 2,400 career hits too.
Yeah.
If not 2,500. I'm not exactly sure where he was, but he was in that area.
Yeah.
He just had a really good career. And it's a shame. And another guy there who I could see manage maybe at some point. You know,
yeah, definitely.
He wasn't really as outspoken, but at one point there, towards the end of his career, the White Sox almost named him player manager.
Yeah.
In his time, that never happens. And he almost got that because he had so much respect from that franchise and from players around the league.
Yeah.
So I can't see why he's not a Hall of Famer. But I think in second chance voting, essentially, he should get put in.
I think he will too. I mean, it's a shame that he fell off the ballot the first year. He didn't get any consideration. It's insane.
I mean, look at someone. He got hit in the face. Go watch that video. He got pegged in the face, stayed in the game, and hit a home run.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, the guy, he was tough, durable. I mean, he was just always on every RBIs. He was always top 5. Home runs, he was in the hunt. You know, he was always had a good, around 300 average for the prime of his career there. You know, he was above average fielder. He's just a great player.
Yeah.
He was the 3 or 4 hitter in the lineup every single day. Yeah, it was a great player. I love watching him. I got his autograph, and he's definitely one of my favorite players. And when him and Dunn were on the same team, that was like, oh.
Yeah.
You know, that was it was great. He's a great player to watch.
Yeah.
And he had some great highlights you got to watch.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that's the first thing I thought of was having Konerko and Dunn in the middle of that lineup for you was probably like, oh my God, this is perfect. Yeah. Some of my favorite players right back to back.
Yeah.
Konerko, like I said, should have been considered more. I always liked Konerko. Another guy just had a really cool. He seemed like he had a cool personality, flair for the dramatic, and on a White Sox team that, like you said, broke the curse, and he was really important to that franchise. And like you said, I think he's got a good shot at managing. He would be a good manager, I think.
Oh yeah.
So the next player that I've got is a pitcher. It's more so. I just want to bring this up because we've got a cool little, like Bronson Royal, little inside joke with him. It's Jake Peavy. First of all, just a little note about Jake Peavy. He was a great pitcher, and I think he got a little bit. I think he might have even caught a little flack for his personality on the mound. He was a very, very intense, almost seemingly angry person when he was on the mound.
Oh, yes.
And he was a great pitcher too. Don't get me wrong.
With the Padres.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like Cy Young.
Yeah,
he was like a Cy Young winner pitcher out there.
Yeah, he seemed like a guy that if you weren't a fan of that team, you didn't like him. The team that he was on.
You didn't want to face him.
No, you didn't. Certainly not.
No.
But the reason that I really bring him up, other than that, he was a great pitcher and all that, and he had I always kind of liked the players that had that real intense demeanor on the mound.
Yeah, and you know what? He's one of the few guys, if the only guy, to come back from that shoulder surgery, torn rotator cuff or blown labrum, and have a quality career.
Yeah, he had a viable career, yeah.
After it. He's like the only one that really had like a quality career after it. A lot of those guys get that, they come back, play really bad, and retire. He actually had a quality career after it, so it was a shame to see him get that at pretty much a decent, pretty early age, but to come back and play well, win a World Series with the Red Sox.
Yep.
Or not the Red. Was it the Red Sox? Yeah, he was with the Red Sox.
I believe so. He also, I think, won with the Giants, if I'm not mistaken. He was there. He was kind of in that era.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was with the Duck Boat with the Red Sox, wasn't he?
He seems like a team he would be on, just kind of because he seemed like a big clubhouse guy, and that was kind of the Red Sox. The last 2 World Series they won was a big clubhouse, big togetherness type thing. But so with Jake Peavy, we the story that we have, it's a little inside joke for our little friend group here, is that we were playing backyard baseball, and Jake Peavy was the opposing pitcher. And if you know anything about backyard baseball, players have good days or they have bad days, and it affects their stats in the game. So if you're having a good day, you are a better pitcher that day, or you're a better hitter that game. If you are having a bad day, your stats go down. So you just, like, say Jake Peavy, for example, would have less speed, less movement on his ball, whatever. And we faced Jake Peavy on his bad day, and for some reason, he threw harder and he had more nasty stuff. So we always had the joke of not wanting to catch Jake Peavy on a bad day.
Yeah, I think we got 1 hit.
Oh, yeah.
I think we got 1 hit. We lost like 2-0 or something.
I think you're right.
Yeah, he might have even got a hit that game. I don't even know. But he was discussing that day.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I think the game glitched or something. But it was just, we always just laugh when we think about Jake Peavy. It's just that big, menacing guy on the mound having a bad day.
Yeah, yeah. So,
I just wanted to bring that story up with Jake Peavy, though. I always like that.
That's fantastic, yeah. So, the next guy that I want to talk about, he was another guy kind of like Jake Peavy, I guess you could say. But AJ Przinsky.
Yeah.
A mean guy.
Mm-hmm.
If you were playing against him. But say if you're on his team, he was one of the best teammates you ever have. But if you're against him, he hated you.
Yeah.
I mean, he hated you.
Yeah.
And he didn't care. He was a pretty solid catcher, 2-time All-Star, won the 05 World Series with the White Sox, Silver Slugger, 188 career home runs as a catcher, 280 batting average, 909 RBIs, 2,043 hits as a catcher.
That's pretty good.
Those are pretty good numbers.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't a great defensive catcher.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a solid player. And, he had that video of him plowing over the catcher for the Cubs there. I can't remember his name, but he plowed him over, and then the guy got up, and they looked at each other in the eye, punched him right in the face, and then he was taunting the crowd. I mean, he was crazy.
Yeah, he didn't care.
He really didn't care.
No.
And he had a good career, played a bunch of teams, Cardinals at the end of his career. He played the Twins, the White Sox. He played with Boston for a year or two there.
Mm-hmm.
He had a good career, and as a catcher, he had some decent stats. I don't think he'd be really a Hall of Fame kind of guy, but if you put up his numbers for a catcher and some other guys, you'll look at him and go, wow, he was definitely one of the better offensive catchers that you've seen, and especially in our time.
Yeah, I agree.
But he was definitely a mean guy, intense guy, old school kind of player, and which is weird now because he's an analyst.
Yeah, I know.
And he's a really nice guy as an analyst, and he really has some good insight.
Yeah.
And he has some funny stories.
Oh, yeah.
But as a player, he was mean, tough, and he just said whatever he wanted to say. And if you were against him, he hated you. And if you're on his team, he loved you.
Yeah.
And it could be one day you're on his team, and the next day you're traded, he hated you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it was, and that's kind of how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And he went definitely towards the overboard side of it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's kind of how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It gets a little too lovey-dovey sometimes in the game. You got to kind of be a competitor, but he was definitely a really good player, and I always kind of admired him for being that kind of tough and so much to his team and not your team that, it's kind of how it should be. And he was an old-school player, so I kind of like that.
Yeah, I got a lot of respect for players like that are that intense in the field. He seemed like the kind of guy on the field, he hated you, but he'd take you out to the bar later and have a drink with you. He seemed like that kind of guy, and I think that there's something to say about players like that just can get that intense at the game, but still just be off the field, just be a normal, regular, outgoing guy. And I always liked Przinsky, and I thought that he almost kind of flew under the radar for being a good hitting and productive catcher.
Yeah.
Next guy I got on here, though, is pitcher, and I should be Hall of Famer, Tim Hudson. Tim Hudson, a guy pretty low-key profile, like low-key personality. Kind of just went about his business. He won 222 games, had a 3.49 ERA, struck out 2,080, had 2,080 strikeouts. Just a consistent pitcher. I believe he pitched about 18 years or somewhere in that ballpark. Really, like I said, really good guy. Jumped around to some teams, and I always just liked it watching him growing up because I always seemed to have him in the video games. I used to always seem to have him on my team. For some reason, he used to be a guy that I would just try to get. It seemed like because he would just be that consistent pitcher, just like in real life. Even in the video game, he was just a consistent pitcher. You knew what you were getting out of him, this sinker baller. He was great. I always liked Tim Hudson, and I don't really have too much to say about him other than the fact that he just seemed like just consistent with my list here, just a guy that I feel like if I met off the field would just be a real stand-up guy and could probably tell you a lot about the game. Is what I like too.
Yeah, he was a good player. He finally got that World Series with the Giants, which was good for his career.
Yeah, well deserved.
A couple Cy Young votes throughout his career.
Mm-hmm.
He had some injuries that kind of not derailed his career, but definitely slowed it at times.
I think
definitely could have had a little bit more wins, probably towards 250 without some injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think he should be make a case for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, with the ERA, I believe is what gets him a nice case, because guys that are going to start coming in like CC Sabathia are going to have higher ERAs. So you got to kind of consider these guys. They're not going to have like 2-something ERAs anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
So Tim Hudson was definitely a guy I liked watching, and a really good pitcher.
Yeah.
The next guy I want to talk about is probably a guy who has a little bit less credentials, I guess, but had a decent, pretty long career. And Ted Lilly, kind of funky, junk ball pitcher, lefty, 2-time All-Star. He was 130 and 113, 4.14 ERA, which is probably a little below the league average.
Yeah.
League average like 4.25 or whatever. So, 14-year career. He played for 6 teams. He was, a decent pitcher. He was just hard to really make solid contact against.
Yeah.
He has that one video where he was like pitching from in front of the rubber, like 2 inches in front of the rubber. Go look that up. That was pretty crazy. But he was just a decent pitcher. I don't know why I always kind of liked him. He pitched with the Cubs and the Dodgers. He played with the Yankees for a year or two. But I always just kind of liked him. He was always like a decent pitcher, and he just, I don't know. I just always kind of watched him, and I was always like kind of a fan of his. I used to get him in the video games and kind of like pitching with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was definitely like a fun guy to play with. Not dominant at all, but just a solid veteran guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's some of these guys, it's just there's something about them. It's not even like a specific stat or maybe the specific team they were on. It's just something about them that we just grab it. I think a lot of it has to do with the video games too, because we grew up playing almost every baseball video game, and some of these guys we just sort of always seem to have on our team or play with, and we just started watching them in real life and just kind of just started admiring them a little bit. But Ted Lilly, I believe, was another guy that had serious shoulder injury and came back and pitched really well. I think similar to, I believe, Michael Pineda, whatever surgery that was. I think he was a similar case where he came back from a serious shoulder injury. So a lot of perseverance there in that guy. Moving on to my last 3 guys here, all hitters. Not much to say too much about him, but the first guy I want to mention is Gary Sheffield, who one of the few reasons I bring him up is that growing up, he was on the Yankee team, similar to Giambi, where he just had this big, intimidating, one of the most unique batting stances ever that I've ever seen, for sure. Shaking the bat back and forth, having the big leg kick, and he just seemed to generate so much power. And one of the furthest home runs I ever seen hit as a kid was by Gary Sheffield in the upper deck of Yankee Stadium, and it just wowed me as a kid. And he's just, with that batting stance, you seem to watch him as a kid, and you're like, wow, who's this guy? You know what I mean? So Gary Sheffield, just to me, was just this big power bat in the lineup, and he always seemed to give other teams fits at the plate. There's something about this guy and his stance. It's just mid-2000s player that almost, you could argue, gets forgotten about, unfortunately.
He should be a Hall of Famer. Over 500 home runs. He had questions about steroids.
Yeah, that whole era.
There's guys who were who had questions with steroids, but he was a dominant player, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. Over 500 home runs with bat and stance. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
He was a great player.
Oh yeah.
So that's a good guy. I liked watching him play, and I still like watching highlights of him because of that bat and stance, man. It was everyone imitated it.
Oh yeah.
If you had a football bat or anything, you did it.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. If you hated him, you did it.
And he did it, I believe, to his benefit because he had to slow his bat speed down.
Yeah, that was the way he did it.
Yeah, which is insane.
And it generated so much power.
Yeah, awesome batting stance.
But the next guy I like to talk about is Derek Lee.
Okay.
Big guy, 2-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove. He won a batting title. He won the World Series in 2003 with the Marlins. Silver Slugger, 331 home runs, 281 lifetime hitter. He was just a nice player, a likable guy, a big player, tall guy. He was kind of skinny earlier in his career. He's got older, he kind of thickened out. But he was another one. He was teammates with Aramis Ramirez and with Chicago and Siriano.
Yep.
He was a good middle hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Middle of the order. He drove in runs. He had home runs. He had a decent average.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Gold Glove fielder. He was just a good player. Who I always liked watching, and you always watch highlights. He always had a nice hit, or he always had a big part of the rally, or whatever it was. And he was just a really good player. And like I said, he won the World Series with the Marlins in '03, and he was a big part of that as a young guy.
Yeah, he was a guy that I just like playing as in the MLB video games. I just always thought that he was almost not a home run or nothing guy, but I feel like when I got up with him at the plate, I felt like I was gonna hit a home run. Like it just like he's just one of those hitters where I just felt like I was just. Like it was like, all right, he's finally up. Now I got a chance here.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was fun to watch. I always loved watching him as a kid. And you had the corner infielders, him and Ramos Ramirez. It's a great combo there.
I love playing with that Cubs team.
Yeah,
I had Siriano, Ramos Ramirez, and Derek Lee in the middle of the order. You had guys like Reed Johnson on the bench.
Yeah.
I mean, you had some players in that team that were just I don't know. I just liked playing with in games, and I liked watching that kind of admiration kind of went together.
Yeah.
Ted Lilly, I think, was on that team.
Yeah. There you go.
A guy in that team who I love, I have honorable mentions here. Carlos Marmol with that slider.
That slider was ridiculous.
Yeah, so there was guys in that team that I liked, and that was Carlos Zambrano, crazy. Lou Piniella, crazy, Milton Bradley with his issues out there. But that team was just a bunch of goofballs. And it was fun to play with in video games back then.
Yeah, they were fun to play with, fun to watch. I mean, they were a unique team. And it was just because it was the Cubs at that time. They're still fighting to get that curse off their back. So you always I feel like a lot of people secretly rooted for the Cubs, even if they were even if they were the Cubs rivals.
Yeah.
But moving on to one of my last two guys here, Yankee guy that I just really loved watching, Nick Swisher, had his postseason issues, which I think caused a lot of problems for a lot of Yankee fans. He just straight up didn't produce in the playoffs, unfortunately. I think with the exception of the 09 World Series, but at that point everyone was producing during the 09 run. But Nick Swisher, the reason that I liked him a lot was around the 2011, 2012, 2013 era when the Yankees were kind of just limboing, just kind of competing record, trying to get in the playoffs. He was a consistent bat in the lineup. He had 30 home runs, 100 RBIs almost consistently for a few years there with the Yankees. Switch hitter. And what I loved most about him was that big personality, that big smile he had. He loved the fans. He loved the bleacher creatures out in right field. He just seemed like a really, really fun guy. He loved to be in New York, I could tell. He loved to be when he went to the Indians, too, he loved to be in Cleveland, you could tell. He's got the whole Bro-Ohio thing going on. But Nick Swisher was just a player that wouldn't necessarily, he's not getting the Hall of Fame or anything like that, and he's certainly nothing to write home about in the playoffs. But there was just something about him watching him play, and he just brought a different energy to the Yankees that I thought was well needed. And I think every team could use a player like Swisher, and he produced in the regular season. So I always like Nick Swisher.
Sure. The next guy that I want to talk about is one of my favorite players, really, of all time. And go look at some of his stats. Edgar Martinez.
Yeah, man.
Finally got in the Hall of Fame, which was well deserved.
Yeah.
Overdue. 7-time All-Star, 5-time Silver Slugger, 2-time batting title. He's the best DH of all time.
I agree.
Hands down. And you know what? It's not even close. Oh, Big Papi, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. How could you say this guy has the award named after him, best DH? He's the best DH of all time.
Yeah. It's criminal that he didn't get in the Hall of Fame sooner.
Yeah, because, he DH'd too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a break. He saved baseball in Seattle. When he hit that ball down the line and Ken Griffey scored from first base, he saved Seattle's baseball.
Yep.
If they don't win that game, they don't win that series, there's no baseball in Seattle. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. That was huge. He was such a clutch player. He had so many big hits. He was great against dominant pitchers. His stats against Mariano Rivera, he's over a 500 hitter.
Which is ridiculous.
309 home runs, 1,261 RBIs, 2,247 hits. And here's a stat, which is unbelievable. I think he's like one of 9 or one of 10 players of all time to have 300 batting average, 400 on base, 500 slugging. He was 312 batting, 418 on base, 515 slugging.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, he batted 356 in 1995.
Just insane.
And this is a guy who DH'd. And he did play third base in his career and first base at times. And for probably like 5-6 years. It wasn't like he just DH'd. He played the position for a while. And he was about average. But he was an unbelievable hitter, dominant player, played for just the Mariners. And like I said, I think he saved baseball in Seattle.
Yeah.
he was just such a well liked guy out there, and he finally got the credit he deserved, and finally got in the Hall of Fame. But great hitter and a great player and a great guy, and I love looking at stats of his, and you just always find something different that you never really seen. And there's some stories about him that they are just unbelievable. He used to take batting practice with the donut on the bat and hit the ball on the donut and stuff like that. There's some crazy stories like that. He was a great hitter and a dominant presence in that Seattle lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy for some reason just wasn't on the radar of the writers for some reason. I mean, I guess the numbers don't immediately jump out at you, the home runs and RBIs and hits. I guess they don't immediately jump out at you, but yeah.
DH expects him probably 400, 500 home runs.
Yeah, that's true.
Still, there's 300, 400, 500. It's like one of 9 players or one of 10 players of all time.
Yeah.
Baseball history.
It's like they pick and choose what stat they want to look at, and they ignore the stats like that really separate good players from great players. And Edgar Martinez was, talk about dominant for his time. I mean, with that lineup with him and Ken Griffey, I mean, how intimidating. And I believe A-Rod was there with them too. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, who do you pitch to? Yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, he was a table setter.
And the moments he had. Like that one, Ken Griffey. Ken Griffey scored from first. Everyone always talk about how that's such a great moment for Ken Griffey. How fast was he? He scored from first base. Who got the hit?
Yeah, hit it right down the line.
Who got the hit to get Ken Griffey to run?
Yeah.
I mean, he had moments like that that were so memorable. That it's just Hall of Fame type moments.
Yeah, I love Edgar Martinez. I think that we both agree on that. My final player here is a guy, unfortunately, I think could have been a Hall of Famer, but just got derailed by injuries so many times, was David Wright. The reason that I like bringing up David Wright is because, being a Yankee fan, the captain Derek Jeter, I mean, he's just such a big presence in baseball and one of the biggest stars in baseball of all time, I'd say. I mean, obviously you could argue one of the better hitters in baseball, one of the better shortstops and all that stuff. But as far as stardom, Derek Jeter, he's like Michael Jordan level of stardom. And when and you got that big shadow casting over the Mets, unfortunately, across town, but you got David Wright, who's their captain. And I'll tell you what, if David Wright doesn't have the injuries that he has, you've got 2 titans in New York of captains. And David Wright could really, A, hit the ball, and B, he could field. I mean, David Wright, the barehanded catch that he had over the shoulder and stuff like that. When he came back from injury, I believe,
getting pegged in the head.
Yeah,
that really messed his career up.
I know.
For 2 years or so.
I know.
Came back with that ginormous helmet, and he definitely had some injuries throughout his career. Then he had spinal stenosis.
Unfortunately, he had the spine stuff.
That really ended his career.
That was it. Yeah. It was cool to see him come back. I believe he just played for one game. I believe he just went in the field real quick and just kind of said, "Hey, I'm here," and you got the New York fans are important to me. I believe he leads most of the hitting stats for the New York Mets. I believe he does.
Like all the major ones.
Exactly. And I was just like, he seemed like another guy, just a really cool, calm demeanor, a captain. He had a leadership personality to him. I feel like if I met him on the street, that he'd just be a really cool guy. And I just always, from afar, I know that there's sometimes that New York Yankees, New York Mets rivalry. I always kind of see through that, and I always liked players in the Mets. And David Wright was that guy that I just I always really liked, and I always liked his play, no matter how much the Yankee and Mets fans like to bash on each other. But I wish that he had a little bit more of a healthy career. He could have really shined, Yeah.
That's all the players that we really want to dive into with some serious stats. But since there's so many players that we have liked, and there's guys here that I want to just mention, so I got some honorable mentions, I guess you can say. I don't really have stats for them, but I just have the names here that me and you, I think, me and Mike have both liked over the years and kind of liked watching and whatnot. So, I got Aaron Harang on here. I mentioned Carlos Marmol. I already talked about Huston Street.
Yep.
Great closer. Joe Creed. Greg Maddux, obviously, I love his stats and some of the stuff he did with the, velocity he didn't really have.
Yeah.
Jim Thome, unbelievable career. Dom, if you're
Shout
listening,
out.
one of our buddies, that's his favorite player. Over 600 home runs, just country strong. One of the nicest guys in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Great analyst on MLB Network. He's a fantastic player.
Tony can tell you a lot about hitting right there.
Yeah, I think he has a record for walk-off home runs.
That doesn't surprise me.
I think he has a record for that.
Yeah.
What a dominant player. He was a really great player.
Love him.
Yeah. Kurt Schilling, even though he's with the Red Sox, I always liked him. And, off the field, he said some crazy stuff. But he was really great player.
Yeah.
Victor Martinez, underrated. He should be a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
Switch hitter with the home runs and hits and stuff he did.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian Beltre was fantastic.
Love him.
Here's a real small guy, Connor Gillespie,
Mm-hmm.
with the White Sox. I don't know. I always hit well with him in video games, and I always watched. I was watching. He would get a hit when I'm watching. I don't know. He was never really great. He never even lasted that long, but I always kind of liked him.
Yeah.
Orlando Hudson,
Mm-hmm.
really liked. Garrett Anderson with the Angels. Michael Young with the Rangers was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Juan Pierre,
Mm-hmm.
go look at his stats. Borderline Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
With the stolen bases and as many hits as he had. I think he only had like 20 home runs, if that, in his whole career. But he had like almost 2,500 career hits.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think he had a bunch of stolen bases, around 500 or 600 or something crazy like that.
Mm-hmm.
He played for a lot of teams, and a lot of teams he played for were pretty decent teams.
Mm-hmm.
Playoff decent. Right around the playoffs every year.
Mm-hmm.
Another lower guy, Aaron Rowan, the Phillies. I remember making that catch in center field where he hit his face on the little screen out there, the little metal fence, and was all bleeding. His defense was fantastic. Scott Rowland, another unbelievable defensive guy,
man.
Hall of Fame. He should be a Hall of Famer as well. Chris Carpenter had a great career, for the Cardinals. Jason Isringhausen, another guy who really had some great years at the Cardinals as a closer. Darren Oliver and Arthur Rhodes are almost like the same person.
Yeah. Pitched forever.
Yeah, lefties, relievers pitched out of the bullpen all the time. Some good teams for every team almost. No real crazy stats, but just were really good. Some really good teams. Mike Cameron, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. One of the best defensive outfielders you're going to watch.
100%.
Had some power. He was crazy. He had he had that incident with Beltran. He ran into him in the outfield and had that big collision. Right?
Yeah,
That was with
big
Beltran.
scary collision, yeah.
But Mike Cameron had a great career. Larry Walker just finally got in the Hall of Fame, thank God, because of the Colorado thing. And he's another great player. Some injuries really derailed some of his numbers, but he almost hit 400 one year. So he had some really great numbers. And a guy I got to mention. He's kind of like the Howie Kendrick that we like. Delman Young.
No, man.
I could have easily went into the stats on him, but I was like, Delman Young was really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
And however old you think he is, he's not that old.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking, oh my God, this guy's been in the league forever.
Yeah.
And I looked up his age, he was like 29.
Yeah.
I was like, he's been playing for 15 years. He was a first overall pick. He had some really good years, played with the Rays, played with the Twins. His defense was never great, which really kind of hurt his career. He had some off-field issues. The minors, he got ejected and suspended 50 games for throwing a bat at the umpire.
Oh, my God.
Struck out and just really threw the bat at him, threw it at him.
Oh, my God.
After his career was kind of already done, he got an incident with a valet driver. He got a fight with him. He had some other minor issues kind of spread throughout his career, but he could really hit.
Yeah.
He always hit good. He had 300. He always came up with big hits. He always played against the Yankees with the Rays and the Orioles and whatever. He always came up with big hits. Never a great fielder, but he always hit the ball.
Oh, yeah.
And I always liked him. He kind of had that kind of round face, kind of like a baby fat on his face. But he was just such a great hitter and a great player, and he always came up with some big hits. And I just liked watching him. And it was a guy that I wish would have kept getting chances in the major leagues. But I think a couple off-field issues and obviously his inability to really play defense at a high level or at a decent level in the outfield. And then obviously get a little older, get a little slower, so you can't play outfield and you get a little slower. It really makes it hard. But Delman Young was a really good player, and he some fascinating stats there.
Yeah.
And I remember watching him, and every time if there was a guy on base and they're playing against the Yankees, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
And Delman Young would come up, and I said, oh my God, he's gonna get a hit. At the Twins, he always got a hit.
Yep.
He just always got the hit. He
Yeah.
always got a base hit. And you're like, Jesus, no. Just like Howie Kendrick, he's another one. I always the same way. Someone's on base, and you're like, oh man, who's coming up? Howie Kendrick. Well,
Yeah.
here comes a base hit, and he's gonna drive him in. That's just how Delman Young was. He was the same guy. Just that Howie Kendrick was a little bit likable and plays more positions and less no off-field issues compared to Delman Young. I kind of derailed him, but Delman Young's still young.
Yeah.
I think he's still playing. I think he's still playing like the Mexican League or in China somewhere or something like that, or Dominican League. I think he's still playing. I think he's like 33, 34. Like he's still really relatively young.
Yeah.
And he came up. I think he came right up too. I think he came up at like a 20-year-old.
That must have been why we thought that he was so old. Like when I first went to look at his age, I was like, this guy's got to be 34, 35 or something like that. He's a veteran. He was 28 or 29. It's like, what? This guy just de-ages. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. He was a really good player. And there's obviously a lot of other players.
Oh, there's a ton we're missing, I'm sure.
But those were some guys that we really wanted to kind of mention. We kind of liked video game-wise, highlights or big moments or stats that we really liked, some of our favorite players. But there's definitely a lot more. Like I said, I just mentioned a bunch here and just like an honorable mention here. It's just there's so many guys that you watch and you almost forget about.
Yeah.
And then you kind of hear them again or see a stat and it reminds you of them.
See an old game on TV.
Yeah, and it just kind of makes you smile or just think about something different with them or a video game with them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what a lot of these guys are.
Yeah.
And it's just, a couple of these guys like Bronson Arroyo and stuff we got stories about, Jake Peavy, which kind of makes it fun for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are some guys that we grew up watching and had some really some solid years, some Hall of Fame careers, and really good players. And it was it's just fun to talk about them again.
Yeah.
And give some of these guys a little bit of a, a mention.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't really give them.
Yeah. It makes me real nostalgic for these players and these teams at the time and just being a kid and watching these guys on the field and playing them in the video games. And it just, like I said, it's just real nostalgic for me. And a lot of these players kind of maybe even shaped how I played on the field. I didn't play any professional capacity, but even on the field, maybe I would mock a stance, or maybe I'd see someone make a play in the outfield. Oh, maybe I should think about tracking the ball that way. You know what I mean? It's just it makes me nostalgic, and these players have a big impact on the youth of the game, and they have a big impact just on people. And there's just so many great players out there. Like I said, I'm sure we're missing a ton. But
and for whoever for our listeners, if you got players that you want us to talk about, just mention, comment to us, whatever it is, leave us a message, however you can, and we'll talk about them. We'll give our opinion on them. We'll pull a stat for them. This group of players that we pulled were mostly had careers in the late 90s into the 2000s.
Yeah,
people that we watched at least I would say at least half of their careers.
Yeah, good
that
portion.
We watched at an older, a decent age.
Yeah.
So if you got players you want us to, bring some stats up for, or give our opinions on, leave us a comment or something, and our next episode we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
But we're planning on. We have some plans for our next episodes. Like we're going to talk about some current players, similar capacity, current players that we really like.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do. I think we're going to do an episode of some players that we don't like throughout the years, and the reasons why we don't like them. And
yeah, you're not going to like everyone, so
reasons why they rubbed you the wrong way or whatever. We got an episode planned where we're going to talk about some stadiums and the ones we've been to and the ones we really like and rankings like that. Some memorable games that we watched on TV we've been to, some of the greatest games we've ever seen, whatever. We're going to do some of those. And then I think we're going to even maybe do an episode where we talk about some players that we never really watched. They were before our time, but we've seen highlights. They're recreated in video games. We've seen highlights. We hear stories about, and we're gonna probably talk about some of those guys too.
Yeah.
So
players our parents liked.
Yeah. So, but for this episode, if you got anybody that you want us to give our opinion on or give a stat about, leave us a comment. And next episode we'll talk about them for a couple minutes, and hopefully you can feel good and you hear something different or you hear a different opinion about a guy you really liked or want to hear about, and hopefully we can help ease some of this dry spell in sports and in our lives, especially with the weather kind of turning the corner. But
sucks.
Yeah, we're just trying to help you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah. So like Frank said, if you got any one you want to comment and message us on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, leave us on SoundCloud. You can leave us a comment. YouTube, you can leave us a comment. Just message us personally, whatever. And we'll read it on the show. So that's it for this episode of Screwball. So look out for the next episode. We'll be talking about current players that we really like. And until then, you can follow me on Twitter at RealMikeLepre and on Instagram at MikeLepre.
And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at FDubs10.
You can follow our official Screwball Podcast Twitter at ScrewballPod and on Facebook at ScrewballPod, no E in Screw. And that's it from us, guys. We'll see you next episode.
Take care.